Suri, can you play the video?
Okay.
The video is still not playing, Suri.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. What's going on?
Ayubowan to all our viewers from all around the world. A very good morning, good afternoon, and evening to you, depending on your time zone. Welcome to the 11th virtual panel discussion hosted by American Sri Lankan Photographic Arts Society in Los Angeles, California, USA, a member of Photographic Society of America, PSA, and the International Federation of Photography of Art in France, FIAP. The objective of our panel discussion is to promote and showcase the incredibly rich biodiversity of the Pearl of the Indian Ocean, Sri Lanka, to the world. I'm your host, Medini Ratnayaka. We are streaming live from Los Angeles, California, USA, and connecting with our panelists in Sri Lanka. This week's topic is Walking with the Big Cats, elusive leopards of the Horton Plains National Park in Sri Lanka. Horton Plains National Park is in the central highlands of Sri Lanka that was designated in 1988. It is located at an elevation of 7,500 feet and is very rich and also many species found here and are endemic to the region. Today, we have a very seasoned personality to share valuable information about these fascinating big cats of Horton Plains from wildlife conservation and photographic perspectives. Let us meet our panelist, Dr. Inoka Kudavidanage. Dr. Kudavidanage is the head of department and senior lecturer on ecology and conservation biology at the Department of Natural Resources of Sabaragamuwa University in Sri Lanka. Dr. Kudavidanage graduated from the Department of Zoology, University of Colombo, with a bachelor's degree with honors in zoology and master's in environmental sciences. She completed her PhD in conservation biology at the Department of Biological Sciences of National University of Singapore. Her PhD research was conducted on the impact of land usage change on the biodiversity and ecosystem functioning in the lowland wet zone of Sri Lanka. Her earliest professional experience was as a freelance environmental journalist where she is grassroots level activist and local communities, acquiring a broader outlook to the biodiversity conservation goals. Dr. Kudavidanage joined Sabaragamuwa University in 2001 as a junior lecturer in biodiversity. The university at that time was located in a rural area, allowing her to work with communities severely affected by poverty, natural resource limitations, socio-economic issues, and human-animal conflicts. Presently, as the head of the department and senior lecturer at Sabaragamuwa University, Dr. Kudavidanage contributes towards producing professionals in natural resource management. She works with various governmental and non-governmental organizations, research institutes, scientific bodies, and NGOs to bridge the gap between the scientists, decision makers, and the community. She has several publications in her chosen area of studies. She was also a task force member of the Biodiversity Unit, National Red Plus Program of Sri Lanka, and the university representative of the Academic Task Force for the Ministry of Sustainable Development and Wildlife. Her most recent research includes a study on wildlife crimes, a population assessment and conservation of mountain leopards, and a status assessment of the national park system. She's also the founder of Tropical Ecosystem Research Network, TURN, and the secretary of the Asia Pacific chapter of the Association for Tropical Biology and Conservation, ATBC. So, Dr. Kudavidanage, we warmly welcome you to our panel discussion today, and we are very, very happy and very excited to have you with us. So, with that, I would like to open this panel discussion, the forum, to you for your presentation and let you take over from this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Vedini. I hope you can hear me clear. And also Mrs. Surya for the opportunity, and also the American Sri Lankan Photographic Association Society for giving me this opportunity to talk to you, not just in the region, but for those who are interested in nature throughout the world. So let me share my screen with you to start with. Okay. Right. So, Vedini, am I clear to you, to all of you?
Yes, doctor. We can see your screen. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, the topic that I'm supposed to talk about today is a study of the leopards of the Horton Place National Park. Although I'm getting all the glory here, it is actually a cumulative project. I have mentioned all the names. So a collaboration between the National Institute of Singapore, the Department of Wildlife Conservation of Sri Lanka, Tropical Ecosystem Research Network, and also Sabaragama University. And we call this LEOSEP, or Leopard Conservation and Ecology Project. That was was initiated in 2015. The most interesting thing is this is about the biggest big cat in Sri Lanka, the leopard. We have 4 cats, and out of that, the leopard is the big cat we have. And the place where I did this research is actually Horton Place National Park, where the leopards are known to be elusive. In a place like Yala, in dry zone, people get to see leopards often. But until we started the research, the life of leopards in Horton Plains is actually something that was sort of a secret. They were elusive. People didn't know what they were doing there. And when I came up with the sort of research publication saying that we have this many number of leopards and they are doing all these and they are being sighted in daytime, people were surprised. Let me show you something else actually that might interest you. Okay. Wait. Give me a second. This problem in sharing that. I'm sorry, Medini, I don't think I can access that file here. I was going to show you something that we first cited, but unfortunately,
Yes,
I can't access the file.
That's fine.
That's okay. That's okay. That's no word. Yeah, we'll go with this. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because what I was going to show you is actually something we saw for the first time. We were actually in Horton Plains conducting an educational program, and we set up a camera trap. At that time, camera traps were novel to Sri Lanka. And then we set up a camera trap just for the sake of it, just to see what we can get. And the following morning, we had 3 leopards, mother and 2 babies, sniffing our camera. Imagine our surprise. Because all this time, people were thinking that Horton Plains leopards are like very few and you don't get to see them. And in our camera trap image, we had a mother and 2 babies. That was actually something that initiated us to do this work. Okay. And yeah. And then Medini gave a long introduction about me. Thank you for that, about my academic and career and all these things. But since I'm sharing this among the global audience, and especially there might be young people, youngsters. If you ask me to describe me and what puts me in this field, I'm a conservation biologist. What is driving me? I would say 2 things: curiosity and affinity. I'm curious. I have been always curious about the animal kingdom. Pardon the plants. I like plants, but my knowledge is limited. But what they do and why they do it. Now, for example, if there's a black robin up there, sort of making a big noise upon a tree, I would ask the question, why is he doing that? The curiosity. If an elephant is sort of trying to damage my camera traps, which they often try to do, I would ask the question, why is she doing that? So the curiosity is a very good way of getting into wildlife studies. And the second thing is the affinity. From my childhood, since I was a child, and you may see here, I'm just cuddling all sort of animals, including reptiles. I had this affinity towards animal. And even today, that puts me at ease, my comfort zone. Now in the second photo, you see I'm holding 2 snakes. Both of them are from wild. We call them Mapila in Sinhalese, Boiga, cat snakes. People believe that they drink blood and they would kill you, but technically they are like mildly venomous. You can hold them and you can they won't damage you. It's all myths. So there are a lot of things that can just motivate you and then reward you in back. For me, apart from my busy academic life, my time with animals give me such a relief. And it's something that a lot of people can gain if you are interested in animals. And I teach in Sabaragam University, Sri Lanka. It's a regional university, and the best thing is it's in the wilderness. So it's everyday life where we get to see a lot of wildlife, interact with them, and especially like things like this. Now the python that I'm stacking into a bag is about 15 feet long. It was found in the backyard of some villager, and we were asked to remove it. So apart from the actual teaching and research, and then there's this owl on top, which people believe is a ghost. They believe that if this owl calls, there's a dead in the community. We call it ulama or the eagle owl, right? The elephants and all sort of other things. This is part of our day-to-day life, and I believe it's a privilege to be working in a university like this. But today the topic I'm supposed to talk about is actually about leopards. And normally I don't give a brief line like this, but since it's going to be like a community of different interest, I would outline what I'm going to talk about. I'll brief you about my study location, Sri Lanka as a country and Horton Plains, the focal species, the Sri Lankan leopard, Panthera pardus, the Sri Lankan subspecies. Then the story of this study, because it's very boring if I go on talking about science. It's not everybody who needs to read about scientific jargon. So I'm going to make it a story, the research, the findings, and finally, something that might interest everybody, the conservation challenges. What can we do to take this animal to future, right? So speaking about Sri Lanka, some of you might have been to Sri Lanka, some might have read about Sri Lanka, some of you might be clueless, but I would just very in one slide brief you. Sri Lanka is part of a global biodiversity hotspot together with Western Ghats. When you say hotspot, there are three things that come to one's mind. The diversity, we have very rich biodiversity, lots of animals, lots of plants, and a whole range of diversity. And high degree of endemism. The term endemism means that a species is found only in a given country. And for Sri Lanka, we have species endemic to Sri Lanka. And on top of that, species that are endemic to given locations. There are certain species that are found only in certain spots, certain little areas in the country. And then the threat. They are threatened. A lot of them are like under threat, and they might go extinct if we don't do anything. And the interesting is like we are just 65,000 square kilometers, a small island. But within this island, we have different bioclimatic zones. We have the arid zone, we have the dry zone, then we have a wet zone, intermediate, we have the lowlands, the mountains, submontane, all defined by the geography and the climate, monsoons. For example, where I live is actually an ecological hotspot, a melting pot, because within 4 hours, you can go from the coast through the arid zone, through the dry zone, through the intermediate wet zone, all the way to the mountain, where the diversity, the communities are totally different. I don't think there's any country in this entire world that fits that bill. It's an amazing place. And Horton Plains National Park, where the study happened, is actually in the mountain region. It's one of the smallest parks. When I say park, it might be confusing for you. Now in Sri Lanka, the protection status of wildlife areas and forest areas are governed by two departments, the forest department and the wildlife department. They both have different categories of protected areas. Here, when I say park, it's a national park, which is a category under the Department of Wildlife Conservation, which has sort of high degree of protection. At the same time, it's open for tourists. So Horton Plains Small Park is one of the most amazing parks in Sri Lanka, and it's part of the Central Highland World Heritage Sites, which is a global protected category. It has these amazing grasslands, forest patches, cloud forests, like short, stubby forests full of like lichens, and it's moist, windy, so cold, it can go minus. It can go to -3. I have recorded in my camera traps. And the vegetation is also amazing. And the interesting thing is, during the British period, this was used, part of it was used for potato cultivation. So that's why it has this mosaic. It's not just purely natural. The land that was used for potato cultivation is today are grasslands. And these grasslands harbor large populations of sambar deer, something similar to the elk. Under natural conditions, you would have something like this. And that allows my favorite animal here, the leopard, to survive because you have a huge prey base. If you are interested, Google Horton National Park and you have plenty of videos and you'll be tempted to come here. And there are lots of other animals too. The bear monkey, the purple-faced leaf monkey, the mountain version, which is like very furry and huge. Lots of lizards, include the horned lizards, amazing lot of amphibians, birds, mammals, and lots of other things to see. It's also the only national park in Sri Lanka where you can actually travel by foot. Technically, in other parks, you had to go in a jeep. But here, because the ground is so fragile, you can't take vehicles in, but you have to walk, and we have defined trails. So come to Horton Plains next time you are in Sri Lanka, and you will not regret it. The second important thing that I'm talking about wildcats of Sri Lanka, we have 4 species, or the 4 groups: jungle cat, the rusty spotted cat, which is like labeled as the smallest wildcat species in the world, the fishing cat, and then the biggest one, Panthera pardus, the leopard, Kotia, Sri Lankan subspecies, Panthera pardus kotia, which is the biggest cat in Sri Lanka. If you take the leopards, there are 8 known subspecies in the world. And if you think of the global distribution, they're found everywhere, in Africa and along the Asian region. All these 8 subspecies are distributed. And I would quote something from the Panthera org saying the leopard is like to the most persecuted large cat in the world. It's extinct in 6 countries and possibly extinct in 6 additional countries, and vanished from at least 49% of their historical range and 84% of its range in Eurasia. Most of them are gone. And so imagine, some of you may have not even seen a leopard in your entire life. And think of this cat vanishing without you even seeing once. And trust me, I have seen so many leopards in the wild in my life. But every time I see it, it's an exhilarating, exciting moment. It's such a majestic animal. Right? Talking of the state of the leopard in Sri Lanka, globally it's stated vulnerable. So for people who are not in scientific stream, International Union of Conservation of Nature labels animals and plants based on their threat and protection category, and there are so many different categories. If you say some animal is critically endangered, that means that animal needs extreme protection. So there are lots of other categories. It's the subspecies critically endangered. That's the worst kind in the Middle East, Russia, and Indonesian islands. And in Sri Lanka, it's listed endangered, slightly below critically endangered, but still needs protection. It's also one of the most protected animals in Sri Lanka. The initial state of protection received in 1964 under the Fauna and Flora Protection Ordinance, one of the most enforcing ordinances in Sri Lanka, which protects our wildlife. But still 1964 was not sufficient because there were some people who were getting permission to kill them, license. In 2009, this was a block saying all cat species in Sri Lanka falls within strictly protected species. So now you can't kill a leopard, you can't damage a leopard, you can't sell a body part, you can't export a body part. This animal is totally protected. There are lots of threats, including habitat fragmentation, human-wildlife conflict, and limited information about ecology. There are lots of things that are still threatening this beautiful animal in the country. How many leopards are there in Sri Lanka? The last estimation is we have about 700 to 1,000 in the entire island. Scientifically, that was the last estimation, but we still need a lot of studies to say how many we have actually. We don't have enough scientific evidence. It's yet to be done. It's a small number for this country, but still, regardless of the number, it's a massive personality in both research, conservation, and tourism sector. Coming to my work, what I have done, when I went to Horton Plains and asked people, have you seen leopards? They were like, well, occasionally, but you don't see them. And they are like very rare, very shy, very few number. This photo, as you see, was taken in 2008 from one of our cameras. It's 11:58 a.m. This animal was like about 50 meters from the roadside, playing with his siblings. They are there. It's just that we don't know where to look for. This study fascinated us and gave us a whole insight to what they do and how they behave in Horton Plains National Park. So coming to my study, they are left down, sort of provide top-down control on prey populations, because you know that ecologically, predators play a very good role in controlling prey populations, which is part of our ecological functioning. And Horton Plains is a very unique ecosystem, and the leopard is the only top predator we have. And in a scenario like that, appropriate management and conservation of leopard requires basic information. We need scientific information. Conservation can be done by people who are interested in conservation, but currently we know that this needs to be backed up by scientific information. And that was the first reason why we thought of doing a study. To mention, this is also one of the photos that we got from a camera trap. It's a leopard feeding on a somebody. So what we wanted to know when we started this study, what did you want to know about leopards? What were the questions we asked? Because you know, in any scientific research, you ask questions. That's how science starts. You are starting asking questions. So in our case, we ask, what is the population size? How many leopards do we have? Are they increasing or are they decreasing? Where do they live? What is their home range? What are their territories? How many females are there in one male's territory? It's very interesting to know. Somebody studying animal behavior know that in some cases, one male and one female. In some cases, one male and multiple females. So what is the case in Horton Plains? How do they reproduce? Are there babies? How do they feed? So we had so many questions because these questions have not been answered before. So, and then this is something that my previous PhD supervisor always mentioned. I had two supervisors, one late Professor Navjot Sodhi, who was like one of the top conservation biologists in the world. He unfortunately passed away halfway through my PhD. But something he mentioned was that when you are doing research, always ask the question, what are the benefits? It's not about sending your research to a publication and you getting a promotion. It's about the contribution to conservation. So I asked the question, because this was like a joint study between my second PhD supervisor, Professor Webb, and I. So what would this study provide? A greater understanding of the Horton Plains ecology. We were going to provide evidence for science-based conservation, awareness, and then potential for mitigating emerging human-leopard conflict. We don't have anything as such to solidly establish, but it's emerging. Scientific skills of Department of Wildlife staff. Now, this is also something important because always scientists do their thing separately. Wildlife conservation people do their things separately. We need to bridge this gap if we want to have a properly functioning job. And then also demonstrate a research partnership between different organizations. And then the next thing is using of camera traps. Now, what is the method we used? We used camera traps. Once again, I'm not going to go through a video for this, but if there's anybody interested in looking into this, please Google this title, Hunt for the Elusive Tiger Slayers. It's a WCS video. This is one of the most touching videos I have ever seen, where they say how camera traps help this wildlife conservation society to actually pinpoint people who killed Malayan tigers. Using the spot design, they kind of pinpoint the tigers that were killed by these the poachers. So camera traps are being used. Now this is a very interesting photo. This is one of the first photos that we have. These are like siblings, two brothers staring at the camera trap. Not something you see often. Camera traps are being used for so many purposes, to build a picture of communities, like to know what species are there, data on where species are, also wildlife crimes management. Camera traps are being used throughout the world for so many conservation and management purposes today. When we started the research in 2014, these camera traps are novel to Sri Lanka, and we were kind of pioneers in bringing this into conservation field. There were some other people who were working, but it was like novel field. And the camera traps we used were like something more advanced. At the very early stage, those were very basic. There were tripwire cameras, there were like simple infrared cameras or simple light beam cameras. There was a whole lot of cameras. If anybody is interested, you can lead. Or Surya, can you hear me? Am I clear?
Yes, we
Am I
can
clear?
hear you, Noka. Yes, we
Right.
can hear
Okay.
you.
So in 1970s, thank you. Scientist called Jim McDougall came up with the first study on tigers in Nepal, and it was like a groundbreaking study. Then actually motivated a lot of people to use camera traps, especially for elusive animals, because a lot of animals are sensitive to human presence. But once you set up a camera and go away, they just do their own job. And that helps people to describe new species, sometimes new records, sometimes to find animals that have not been discovered for ages. So this was a groundbreaking science those days. If you ask me the type of cameras we use something called the passive infrared camera. This is how it works. If you just set up a camera, and now for us, we set up a camera and leave them in the field for like almost 3 months, right? So the camera should be taking photographs of animals crossing, but if it takes every movement, every photo, the battery will die fast. So in this case, cameras use both heat and motion to take photographs. It detects the heat and detects motion, and combine that to take photographs of animals. It's a very interesting way of sort of use the Recon XC600 to use to estimate the distribution and density, species, and the bycatch, and to provide insight to wildlife ecology. Now, the next question a lot of people ask me is, why do you use two cameras in a given site? Normally, in our case, for a given camera spot, we use two cameras. Why? The reason is, if you know identifying leopards using like spot pattern, you need to have photographs of both sides. Now this is like one leopard and photographs taken from two cameras on the same site. This will help us to pinpoint the spot pattern and identify individuals. That's the reason. At the same time, if one camera fails, we still have photographic evidence from another location. So the same location, and we can't afford to use. Okay, the next being Professor Edward Webb, who was the PI, and his team from Tropical Ecosystem Research Network, Mr. Ravindra Amar Singh, who's the director, and we both Turn and Sabargam University and our team. And also the interesting thing is Department of Wildlife Conservation. We had the park warden and two wildlife guards fully trained and engaged in this research. It's a challenge, and I'm sure Mr. Surya knows. For us, it was sort of something very interesting to get these young people, train them, so that we know that once the research is over, this knowledge will be used for conservation management, and at the same time, knowledge will be transferred. That's the whole reason why we got these people permanently involved in research work as well as publication and whatever the credits that came out of the research. So as I said, this was not initially a plan for research. We started a field course on how to use camera traps in Horton Plains. We use camera traps and we use drones. basically for technical purposes. And then we started training wildlife staff. When we were doing these activities, only when the park warden came and said, okay, you have the technology and you have the knowledge, why don't you start a research? That was the beginning. So as I said, the initiation, the credit of it goes to the wildlife department, where they prompted us, motivated us to start a research in their specific place. All the resources and support came from Singapore, and in Sri Lanka, we put together a team. These were some of the first photographs that we took where we mapped Horton plains using drones. For those who are familiar, you may know that this is like the office complex and the park, and the world famous World's End, the platform, and the view that you get on a clear day. If you come to Horton Plains, if you get to see this, you are very lucky because often it's covered by a lot of clouds. But in this case, it's open. These were drone photographs. The second thing is, okay, everybody is saying that there are leopards here. But what evidence do we have? Because none of us were trained. My entire team, we were not trained to spot leopards, which is the case in most of the research. So we got a trainer from Malaysia who is with the Wildlife Conservation Society. And he trained us to pick leopard hairs from places where they have just rubbed their body, to say stories from the Scat, and to mark locations, to identify places where they have scratched, where they have like stayed the night. Simple things that we miss in day-to-day life, we were trained to now spot. It's a very interesting thing because we are missing a lot of things when you don't know where to look. And we were trained to identify these locations. And then the interesting thing was use of camera traps. Until then, we didn't know how to use camera traps. It's just not a matter of tying a camera to a tree. It's more than that. The measurements, the height. You should be in a position to tell the height of the leopard if it passes certain planes. And not to spot the head or the tail or the body, but the entire animal. All those technology was transferred to the entire team in Sri Lanka, including the wildlife staff. These are our study locations. So what you see here is the location of Horton Plains in Sri Lanka. The white line locations that leopards might exist. The yellow areas where they have discovered some of the dead bodies. And the points are where we have set camera traps, simply speaking. You'll be surprised. For a park that was so like people didn't know that twin leopards were there. During the first part of the study, for 2 years, we discovered 355,000 images of various animals, including 8,000 pictures of leopards, where we identified 17 individuals. That is basically for the library to identify the individuals separately. The second stage where we looked at the populations, we had 249 leopard incidents. And if you take it totally, we had almost 15,000 camera trap nights, total of almost 823 leopard incidents, and 23 confirmed leopards for this small park. It's a huge number. And what you see here, there's one where leopard is playing with the camera. We have lots of interesting stories to tell. One time Ravi left his camera on a pole by mistake. Next time we went there, we have all the photographs on the other camera where the leopard is taking down the entire pole and just tearing apart the cat. So lots of interesting stories to tell. But it's an amazing story. If anybody is interested, we have the publication that came out last week, Webetel 2020. You can read the paper. And if anybody wants me to email that, please let me know. I'm very happy to share. Once we have all the camera traps images, what did we do? Now we have two things, leopards and other animals. So what we did was like we built inventories and libraries and databases on these two types of animals, leopards and non-leopards. Right? For leopards, we organized them and then identified them, group them into different individuals, and then use a statistical model for population estimation. For other species, we did different study. I'm not going to go into deep science, but I just put this slide because if there's any young person out there who's interested in research, you can just learn something from this. Then these are some of the other species that we spotted. The samba deer with the babies, and here we said the samba selfie, the porcupine, the wild boars, and then the striped neck mongoose, the rusty spotted cat, the smallest cat in the world, the barking deer, peacock. Surprisingly, now this is very interesting because it's a result of climate change. Peacocks are dry zone species, but now they are slowly moving into mountain area. Brown mongoose, babies here, wild boars, leaf monkeys, the black-naped hare, whole lot of birds, mouse deer, the elusive the spur fowls, ringtail civets, you name it, it was there. So this camera trap, apart from leopards, gave us a whole lot of other information. Now what do we do? Next step. As I said, we create the library, organize the incidents for modeling. We see how many leopards, where they have been spotted, how many times, capture history, all this information. You get things like this. Now, for an example, in this case, the same leopard has been sighted in the same location at 2 different times. Nighttime and daytime, 5:50, 4:41 and 10:14 a.m. If you look at the signs, you'll see that it's the same because leopard spot patterns are like ID cards for them. Look at the front leg. Look at the spot pattern. First line, the first line here, the second line of spots, second line of spots. Look at the hind leg and you'll see the same pattern. It's very interesting how you can use these spots to differentiate between individuals, and it works like a shot, trust me. It's not always the happy story. What you saw here is like a good photo, but most of the time we have to get rid of photos like this, where things are way because they move so fast, sometimes you don't get. So it's not an easy task. It's not like that you have beautiful photos all the time. You have a whole lot of things that you need to screen out. This is what we found. 23 leopards during our study period starting from 2015. We have codes for them. We don't still have names. Perhaps you can help us to name them. Whether the status confirmed, whether it's male, female, and when you say status unconfirmed, that means we have seen them only once. We had 23 leopards, out of which 18 have been observed more than one time. For this small park, it was a massive number, but I'm not telling you that these leopards live in the park. These leopards have been caught in cameras moving inside the park. But please understand, just because you saw an animal inside a park does not indicate that it's permanently living there. Right? That's the interesting thing that we need to know. One could be so happy saying, oh my God, Horton Plains has 23 leopards and they're living there. No. That 31 hectares might not be sufficient to hold all these things. I will show you that shortly. And this is what we got from the library. Now, if you are interested, please once again refer the paper. It's online, it's free for everybody. You can download it. This is what we call a leopard library. So we have, this is like for females. You have all the females, you know where they live, activity areas basically in the park, how many times you have seen them, and in which period. All that information is there in the library. I'm just pulling out some photos for convenience because not very clear. Now these are some of the males that we had, right? Very interesting males, and these are some of the females we had. So we have a library, sort of a photo album for each of these individuals, sorted out separately from camera trap images. And this might interest you, looking at the capture history for each of them. This is the name of the leopard, and male or female, how many times you have seen that animal, and where you have seen that animal. That information is there. Now, this is important for conservation decision makers. It's important for park staff. They know where the leopards are. They know where it has been seen, how many times. And if it goes missing, you know, okay, now that leopard is not there anymore. So what happened? If one of those leopards die outside the park, you know how to identify, okay, this is one of the Horton Plains leopards has been killed by somebody. So all this information comes handy when we are talking of conservation. And this is very interesting, a very interesting chart. When you just map the time where you have seen the leopards, you have two peaks. Just after sunrise and just around sunset. So most of the leopards are active just after sunrise, early in the morning, and late in the evening, dawn and dusk, simply speaking. Why? What is the answer? What is the reason? There are so many answers. Like, okay, the time period where the prey goes back to their places after feeding in the night and comes out in the morning. So the time of the prey active period. And some say the time where the tourists, just before tourists come in and just after tourists leave, so that you don't have that many people there and the animals are free to move around. It's a very interesting question to look into. Why are leopards seen more often early in the morning and late in the evening, according to this? And then, very simply speaking, I'm not going to go into technicalities because it might bore a lot of people, but we use something called SCCR model to estimate the home ranges and where the leopards are and the density. It's a statistical modeling technique. Simply speaking, what we call mark recapture. You see a leopard, you identify it, and you see it the next time, you feed it in the system, and then it will help you to determine the density, abundance, and where they are. It's all like basic science, right? It's a statistical model, right? But the interesting thing is the table. Now, all these days, when we say Sri Lanka and leopards, people talk of Yala National Park. Because when you go to Yala National Park, you will be seeing a leopard. The density estimated is 12.1 per square kilometer, 100 square kilometers. That's the density estimated. Talk of Horton Plains. After this study, it's 15.1. That's the highest density ever recorded for a given park in the region, in Asia. Horton Plains has that many leopards. Why? Good habitat, lot of prey base. But I ask you a question now. Tomorrow, if you rush to Horton Plains to see all these leopards, you will not see them. Why? Unlike in Yala, where people have access, lots of access roads, Horton Plains does not have that many access roads. Only limited roads for the public to walk through, and leopards are most of them hiding inside. It's a fantastic habitat where these populations can survive without human interference and sufficient food to feed on. So this is one of the most exciting facts for me from this entire study. And then we have something like this, activity centers. Based on our recording, we mapped where they are active. The pink ones are females and the blue ones are males. And you'll see that where the guys are more towards the edges, where the girls are more towards the center, and there are some that are even recorded outside. This is the final output, and you will see. Look at where the females are. Most of them are staying outside, taking care of their babies and feeding. Most of the guys are moving out. So what does that tell us? Horton Plains by itself is not sufficient to maintain this population. You need to combine the protection status with the landscape outside. Just because we have a park, you can't put a fence around it and be happy because these animals are moving in and out. Our environmental boundaries are not the boundaries of animals. Our administrative boundaries set by government departments are not the ecological boundaries set by animals. They define their own. So if you are happy that you are protecting Horton Plains, no. For the leopards, you need a place outside. So these are things like this. So I'm just being very, very brief. So feel free to contact me if you need any more information about this. What are we going to do from this point onwards? We need to look at the activity patterns. We have published the paper, the main findings, and then need to find the diet analysis. What do they eat? Other ecological factors. What other species are there and how do you interact with leopards? How do you use these findings for training purpose? And then from this point, how do we monitor this long term? Because it's very important. Now I have 23 leopards for this period, 15 leopards for this monitoring period. But in 2 years' time, what's going to happen? If I just forget the entire thing and be very happy about my study, I'm not being a conservationist. If I go back in 2 years' time and say, oh my God, this number 23 or number 15 has come down to 11, that means obviously something is wrong. And it's my responsibility to let the conservation decision makers know that something is going wrong here, right? And also I'll see if I can get the videos for you after this, right? Now we have, apart from the general study, we have videos and recordings of feeding behavior. And it's very interesting to see how they feed. Sometimes it's just one male, bunch of females, a male and female together. Sometimes when the male comes, the female would leave, how they would safeguard their young from the males and other species feeding. All these things are there and study by itself to understand how they feed and why they do that. And then things like this. You don't expect to see things like this in Horton place. Crows. Crows have been bought by people and they are waste. And now what they are sort of taking over the system. They are eating bird eggs, they are eating amphibians, lizards, destroying nests, all because that we are not careful about how we dispose our waste. This is something that we need to think carefully. We also looked into feeding ecology or scat analysis, where you can actually wash the scat or the fecal matter of leopards, and then you can isolate something like this in the trays, the hair and the bone parts. And by looking at it, you can tell what they have been eating. The interesting thing for the general audience is every species has their own hair scale pattern. By looking at the hair, you can tell whether it's a porcupine or whether it's a samba or whether it's a black-naped hare or a mongoose or a mouse deer. So every species has different scale patterns in their body hair. So when you analyze the species, you can tell, okay, this leopard has eaten that many proportion of hair, that much proportion of samba deer. That's very interesting. Now, if you compare Candy and Horton Plains and Yala, the composition of what they eat differ from one place to another. It's also part of the ecology. Some of the photographs. Okay. So we are going to finish the final population estimate and then analyze activity patterns of leopards and camera trap bycatch and diet analysis and species list and uses for training. There were also a whole bunch of other interesting observations for the general audience once again. Now, in this case, this we call 7-day leopard. Every 7 days, the fellow used to come to this tree, stay there for a little while, rest and go back. Beyond that, you see actually the public road. So it's so close to the road. And we don't know how it does, but probably when it's moving around the territory, this tree, this location falls within every 7 days. And then this. I stopped being a scientist here and become a very sort of a screaming, squeaky female. You can't help being excited by this baby. It's a very fluffy, very cute baby spotted inside the park. Scientifically, you can be happy saying that they are breeding. But as a just general someone like a human being, this is something very interesting. And the mother was very protective. She was very angry that our camera, even in our absence, was photographing her baby. So these things give us some hope to know that they are breeding, they are increasing their population. It's a beautiful thing because it's something I believe. You can be a scientist, but it's not just about brain. You can't be a conservation biologist without combining your heart and brain. If you just think of your brain, you'll be making very crude decisions. But if you put your heart and brain together, you can make decisions that are actually productive. Right? For me, this was something I will never forget, a photo I really treasure. And then things like this. Now you will see here, she's a female leopard with a swollen mammary gland. We were trying to find ways to treat her, but she just went missing. And then after so many months, she appeared with the wound healed. So animal health, camera traps can help to provide such information. And then things like this, exciting. Selfie. She has zillion photographs. I don't know why she did that. She was coming in front of camera all the time and making faces and turning her head here and there. Right? Kind of exciting things. Sometimes you really don't know how to interpret the way they behave. And then things like this. It's like two siblings playing. Not too far from the road, and check the time. It's midday. Daytime. For a park that is known to have elusive leopards, seen only in the daytime. These were surprising facts. So these are some interesting photos. This is like mother and two cubs. And then other things. And the first time we recorded rusty spotted cat in Horton Plains. And with her baby, we published a paper on this. Those are also another interesting things that give us hope. On top of the research, we also had a whole bunch of other things because this research helped us to do some good knowledge transfer, especially to wildlife department staff. Those two people, these two, this lady and the gentleman, Indika and Charita, who worked with us, gained an immense amount of knowledge. I always keep saying as an academic, we researchers should be working hand in hand with people who implement conservation. And in this case, we can be very happy because we train these two young people to take conservation knowledge ahead. They went to Singapore, they learned the techniques, the theory, and this is something most researchers should be thinking about when you're doing a research. Get these people involved, transfer the knowledge. Knowledge transfer should not be happening when you write the paper. It should happen at every step of your research. And the best way to do that is to get people from wildlife department or forest department who actually work in the ground level. Let them get some benefit from your research at every step. And that's the way to go. I personally believe, my team believes in that. Right. So finally, coming to the implications of this research, what we discovered was this park exhibits a very high leopard density and also breeding populations, and then differences in habitat use. The males moving out, the females staying inside. And also we came up with this confirmed, scientifically backed information that we need to look at landscape level habitat management. Just because you have a protected area, that does not mean that you can be happy. Think of what's beyond and integrate the land use outside into what's there in the park. And also interagency collaboration, because there are lots of people now. If I'm thinking of protecting this park, if another government agency is thinking of developing just outside the park for agriculture, what's going to happen? All my effort, my funds, everything that's used, especially government money, might go waste if somebody is developing or somebody is doing something else. So agencies need to collaborate. And also conflict mitigation, which I will just speak shortly. I repeated this. Basically, the study repeated viable research collaboration. We established a number of leopards and the densities in Horton Plains, and we came up with sort of a monitoring plan and sort of a long-term management. And then beyond the pretty pictures, so what's happened to leopards in Sri Lanka? Number one, they have been identified really like placed at top level for tourism, but we also have them dying due to various reasons. Poor land use management, lack of awareness, and various other reasons are killing our leopards. And this year has recorded the highest number of leopard deaths in Sri Lanka, and primarily due to snaring. The snares are often for other species, for bushmeat, but unfortunately, leopards get caught in these snares. We don't have direct evidence to say that the snares are set for leopards, but we have sort of auxiliary evidence that there are cases, especially because people are afraid. Sometimes it's myths, lack of awareness can make people to set snares for leopards. So we have a crisis situation right now, which the country needs to address. And these are some of the things that we actually noted outside Horton Plains. Once again, this due to snares. So my final message is that as people who are working in the conservation sector, we work inside parks. Sorry, we work in the buffer zone. We work in the buffer zone. We work in the region. But all these isolated studies and findings, they don't make sense unless we think of the species and the conservation of the species, and we get together, combine our work, and come up with a common objective, which is something really necessary for this country. So I'm ending now saying this project was a flagship collaboration because we had so many institutes. We have shared this data with the wildlife department. There's now a center in Horton Plains, especially a corner established for this specific research where I've identified leopard photographs and all the information is there. And we believe that knowledge transfer is the principal objective of every research. And we have set up a plan which could be taken forward. These are the parties that I need to acknowledge: our team, Department of Wildlife Conservation, the Director General, the AD Research, Training, and then the ADs of Central Province, Park Wardens and the staff, National Institute of Singapore, my main collaborator, Sabarkam University Turn, other individuals. The permit we got every step. This is something I highlight. If you are doing wildlife research in Sri Lanka, please adhere to permits, to rules and regulations, because these are not obstacles. They have been set to safeguard the animals, and one should definitely follow these rules and regulations set by the wildlife and forest departments, and the funding provided by the National Institute of Singapore. Thank you very much. It was very brief talk, but I'm open for questions, discussion, and even beyond this point, my target was this: talk to you about Sri Lankan leopards, to show you what we did, to interest you to come to Sri Lanka and see all this, and also to contribute to conservation in whatever the possible way you can. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Inoka. That was a very informative journey that you walked us through. So we truly appreciate that opportunity you gave us. So as a scientist and as a conservation biologist, you've done an amazing job with your research work. So, and that's an extensive research. So let's talk about the future. What are you planning to do beyond the Horton Plains research? I'm sure our audience would love to know that.
Okay, so currently we have finished the first step in Horton Plains. And we might be returning to the place. As I mentioned, we are planning a long-term monitoring, because you just can't say, okay, you have this many and then forget it. So you need to monitor and see what's happening. That's one thing. Me and my team, led by Mr. Ravindra Singh and all, we are currently working in the dry zone in a couple of other parks, Lunugam, which is part of Yal National Park, and also Kubar National Park, looking into population dynamics. But the most important thing is right now to combine and work on a cumulative project to conserve the leopards of Sri Lanka. And we are shooting towards, where we are aiming to work on that. Where what I believe is that we should be combining our resources and sharing our experience with the groups who are working towards a better conservation of this specific animal. At the same time, we are also interested in looking at other places where leopards might be, and also that are threatened without us knowing, and mapping those. So there are some people who are mapping to contribute. So generally, if you ask me what the general overall plan is, to make use of this research work, what we have done, what we plan to do in future, for a cumulative effort to conserve the leopards of Sri Lanka. That's the plan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Inoka. Yeah, and one thing that I want to emphasize to our viewers, I mean, I really like that idea of sharing the knowledge with our youth and with the teams who would implement the work that you had shown them through your research. So I think that's very, very important, because knowledge sharing, and you also mentioned about training and long-term monitoring. And I'm glad to see that as experienced scientist and as a leader, you have taken the initiative to involve our youth in our country in these projects, which is a very, very good thing, because we have to develop our youth to be nature lovers. And I'm so glad to see that you're taking that initiative and providing the leadership for that. So thank you so much. And also, in your opinion, what are the artificial factors we need to let's talk about the critical importance. In your opinion, what are the critical factors we need to address for the conservation of Sri Lankan leopard?
Okay, in that context, there are a few things. One, develop a proper understanding in terms of awareness development, as well as scientific knowledge for the conservation of leopards. We can't conserve or we can't do anything about anything if you are not aware, if you don't have enough information. So the first step is the information. Second thing is public awareness. Especially conservation is not just the role of the Department of Wildlife Conservation or scientists. Conservation is everybody's job. And to conserve, you need to be aware. So the awareness of development and training is important. The other thing is landscape management, because one of the major threats we have for the leopards today is habitat destruction. And from one side, if you are trying to do conservation, and if, on the other side, if you are clearing land, saying that, okay, this land is for agriculture. Now, if you ask me whether we need more land for agriculture, it's a very blunt statement. I would say no, we don't need more. Get the maximum use of the existing land, because right now we are not getting at least 50% benefit from the existing land. So rather than clearing more forest areas for agriculture, use the existing land and get the maximum benefit without disrupting the habitats, because it's this forest fragmentation that makes leopards or put them in contact with people. There's a forest and you encroach, you cut through and fragment it. The animal has to cross the human habitat to get to the next fragment. And on the way, it's exposed and it might even go and grab some easy meal, which subject it to sort of threat. So this poor land use management is something you have to be really concerned about if you are thinking of conservation of not just leopards and other animals as well. And the other thing is law enforcement. You find a leopard in sort of, say, for an example, tea plantation. Just bringing the dead body is not sufficient. You need to look into what caused it, who did it. And I personally believe that strict enforcement of law, not just fine, but jail sentence, because unfortunately we come to a situation where unless there's the serious punishment, serious enforcement, our people would repeat the crime. So strict law enforcement and training of staff who are doing law enforcement for that purpose is a must if you need to stop wildlife crime. Those are the 4 key points that I think as an individual that should be implemented if you are thinking of proper conservation, on top of having a really proper, really sort of drafted and outlined conservation plan for leopards for Sri Lanka, which engages all stakeholders.
Thank you, Dr. Inoka. I think it's really, really important. As an advocate, you provided those bullet points to the public because they need to know that. And also, we have an audience from all around the world. I'm sure there's Sri Lankans and everyone who loves Sri Lanka, everyone who loves nature, who's watching this. So to the public, what is the role of the public in protecting the wildlife of Sri Lanka, including the leopards? What would be your message to them with regard to their set of responsibilities as citizens of Sri Lanka?
Okay, Bedin, let me do this. Let me just share one slide that I use for my students because I think that would simplify things. Okay, I'll do this. It's much better. Yeah, okay, this is it. Right. So if you're a stakeholder, if you're a public, I will say in a very simple manner, these 4 things. First, be aware of the conservation situation, of the wildlife around you. Now, I see situations where sometimes people talk of leopards. Now, I have seen people talking of leopard conservation in media and putting photographs of mountain lions or the Bengal tiger, which is not in Sri Lanka. Knowledge is just a fingertip away and it's not very difficult to access. Be aware, because lack of awareness is a driving force of environmental destruction. Sometimes people say, oh, I killed it because I didn't know that it's important. Knowledge is very, very easy to access these days. And especially, people protect only what they value. If you don't know that it's valuable, you just totally ignore it. Now, if there's a tree, it's an endemic, a rare tree, and a person might just cut it off saying, oh, I didn't know. So that lack of awareness is important, especially for adults. And if you are going to put an end to this trend, destructive trend, especially to young people. Second step, do no harm. If you can protect it, at least do no harm. Abstain from activities or reduce activities that are damaging. That includes polluting the environment, polluting water, killing animals, or whatever, cutting trees. Just stop those destructive activities. Those are second step. Third way, mitigate. If you have to do it, say you have to clear a forest area, you have to cut a tree. You are cutting a tree, plant 10 trees. Mitigate your hazardous activities. That's the third thing. So knowledge, doing no harm, mitigate, and the final step is going beyond that. If you really care for nature, engage other people and contribute to conservation positively. It could be just something little, it could be something big. If you have enough money in your company, use that for conservation, identify the needs. If you have people, get them to work on conservation things. If you know why a species is important, share that knowledge. So I repeat, be aware of the conservation issues, do no harm, mitigate the damages of what you have done, and actively step up and do your conservation work. This is not just for leopards, this is for every species, including plants and animals. This is my personal knowledge and personal message to anybody who cares for the environment, because conservation is not just the job of Department of Wildlife Conservation or the government or somebody. Conservation is a people's function, and we all got a say. And if something goes wrong, we are all responsible. Medini, you are mute. Mute.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Inoka. So also one thing that I want to emphasize to our audience, Dr. Inoka is a very experienced researcher, scientist, and a conservation biologist. And I would like to ask you, Dr. Inoka, I'm sure in Sri Lanka and also in our audience from all around the world, there could be budding scientists, conservation biologists from our younger generation who will someday follow your footsteps, because we always talk about developing our future and their professional development. For those young scientists, because research work is a huge commitment, what would be your message to those scientists who will pursue a career someday and will engage in those researches? What are the main things that they would need to focus on, and what type of commitment is expected?
It's a very good question, Medini, because I'm an educator, I'm a teacher. And something I always remember is that from my childhood, I was kind of a wild child. Because I was the only child, I didn't have siblings, and I always end up in the forest and came home and with all these bits and pieces of twigs and various animals, furry creatures. And my parents encouraged me. There was no restriction. So for parents who got such children, I'm just telling you, do not discourage them. Provide nature. If you see that your kids are there, consider it a blessing and let them pick their own path. That's the first thing. For children, feel free. Do not be afraid to follow your dream. Now, for me, being a conservation biologist or a wildlife person in Sri Lanka as a female was a very difficult task. It's somehow varied. So if you have a dream, feel free to follow it, but make sure that you know where you are going. For that, you need knowledge. You just can't dream without having a path. So make sure that you have enough knowledge and tools to achieve that. So equip yourself with knowledge, talk to people, talk to experts, make yourself known. Sometimes you might have this urge to be somebody, but you're afraid to speak up. Feel free to talk to people, because you'll be surprised. There are a lot of scientists out there who are willing to talk to you and guide you and to see the next generation budding. So talk to people, follow your dreams, equip yourself with knowledge, and also identify what questions are there out there in the world, and don't get sort of mixed up in everything. Pick what you need to do and then train yourself to get there. That is the message. And including me, there are a lot of people out there who are willing to talk to you, guide you, and help you. Just make use of that, whatever the resources. That's my message.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Inoka. So we would like to thank Dr. Inoka Kudavidanage for taking time off from her very hectic schedule to be with us today for panel discussion, sharing her immense experience and knowledge and her research work with us, and also to advise our younger generation. So thank you so much, Dr. Inoka. Again, we truly appreciative. We are very, very appreciative of the time and effort you put into our panel discussion today. And yes, so for our viewers, our next panel discussion, the topic is going to be wonders of the bird world. And we are going to have three very experienced panelists with us for the next panel discussion, which is going to be on the 5th of September. That's a Saturday at the same time, 7:30 a.m. PST, Pacific Standard Time, for our viewers in US, and also for our viewers in Sri Lanka. It would be the evening at 8 p.m. And the panelists are going to be Dr. Professor Sarat Kotagama, Dr. Sampath Senaviratne, and we are also going to have one panelist from US, Mr. Benny Isaac Jacob Schwartz. So that would be our next panel discussion on September 5th. So we will be streaming live on Facebook, so please join us. And I want to thank everyone who joined our webinar today, and enjoy the rest of the day. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye-bye.